Hello, creatives. Welcome to episode 2 of the Tailored Wellness. And today I'm talking to you about fashion and mental health. And to contrast with the topic, which is a bit heavy, a beautiful embroidered jacket. Why talk about fashion and mental health? For those who already follow me, a year ago I posted a video on social media where I talk about my journey from the time I was in a psychiatric clinic to Paris Fashion Week with a stop in London. For me, it was a way to make myself vulnerable. And I remember I posted it because I had a conversation with my best friend who told me, I forget that 7 or 8 years ago, you went through a really tough time in your life, but that's what made you who you are today. And I found that so powerful, thinking that if 10 years ago I had someone who showed me that you could get through it, things would have been so much easier. I think for me, having a lot more hope earlier on and maybe getting out of that very difficult path much sooner. I won't say why, the reasons behind how I ended up in psychiatry. Let's just say it was a burnout and quite complicated in a way. There were several layers, family, personal, including one related to growing up in a family where emotions aren't really communicated and being gay and not being able to talk about it. So yeah, it was a bit of a complicated situation. I wanted to make a joke at the beginning to say, here we go, another white gay man, gay, working in fashion, which has nothing to do with my topic, but actually it does. At least that's what I used to tell myself. And actually, it's not because you're not part of a minority, even though as a French person of Portuguese origin, you come from a pretty specific background and you don't necessarily have any points of reference or people who could guide you. You find a community and you become part of it. But this depression really left a mark on my life because it put a stop to my momentum, to my studies. It really put something of there was really a crack. There was a before and an after. It was actually kind of funny at first because I was immediately drawn to things that are natural, so-called gentle approaches. So I changed my diet, I meditated, I did yoga, all the somewhat cliche things. And you can laugh about it because it's cliche, but that's really what kept me going. And it was a real intuition to immediately start searching for psychological answers, why, and so on. And unfortunately, I had lost a lot of weight because my anxiety attacks were getting stronger and stronger. So I decided to go to psychiatry, where I spent 5 months. From January to May 2016, that's right. So I could be in a safe space, rebuild myself, and understand what was happening to me. And most importantly, to get out of it. I think what's most important here is getting out of it. And why am I talking about it today? Because I see a lot of people around me who are dealing with these issues. Well, not issues, more like challenges than problems. I don't really like the word problem for this. Mental health, mental balance, life trauma. Today in France, the taboo is starting to fade away. But back then, when I was in school and I told the school principal, I think I'm depressed, things are really not going well, I was basically told that I needed to talk to my parents and that it should be discussed with them. And I said, well, yes, but what can the school do? So you're kind of left to deal with it on your own. And it's a bit stigmatized, like, oh, look, that one isn't doing well. By the way, shout out to my best friend who at the time told me anything but that with you. Everything's fine today. But, well, it was hard for everyone, for those around me too. But above all, I was lucky enough to be able to go to London. And when I arrived in London later on, I was welcomed with open arms. They put systems in place for me that allowed my health to improve very quickly and really helped me get out of that situation. And today, in turn, I wanted to give hope to others. To give advice to others. I'm not a psychologist, nor a therapist, nor anything like that. But to provide tools to guide you to the right people. So you can talk about these topics, so you can express them, so you can understand that there will always be work, no matter the to-do list, and that sometimes you have to know when to say stop, you have to know how to rest. And in my case, there were really 2 sides to this anxious depression, an inner truth that needed to be expressed. And in the spiritual side of things, it's often said that a depression like this is a bit like the dark night of the soul. Sounds very nice on paper, but in reality, it's more like hell on earth, honestly. In that clinic, I met some extraordinary people people who were bipolar, borderline, depressed, anxious, but above all, people who were very intelligent. And I realized that when you're intelligent, you ask yourself more questions, which means more sensitivity and therefore more ground that allows or at least interacts with these mental health issues. And that's a good memory. But still, when I was there at the time, it was a different story. And so for me, speaking up is really, yes, creatives and even the greatest creatives and others also face these challenges. I have absolutely zero filter when it comes to talking about it. Honestly, let's call a spade a spade. And I think that's very important. When I see young people who are on the edge, it really touches me deeply. And I want to show them that you can get through it. There are 1,000 therapies, and God knows I've tried at least a good 10 of them to find the right one. And then at some point, things change. Depression, it seems to me that today, it's the illness, depression/anxiety. It's the second most common illness after cancer. And our brains aren't developed or evolved enough to handle the stimulation we get today from the outside world or social media. It's about comparing ourselves, it's climates of anxiety, eco-anxiety, war, financial complications, everything you see in the news. You have to know how to protect yourself from it. Honestly, I haven't had a TV for years. I think that the important information reaches me when it's supposed to reach me. And you have to know, not to turn your back on things, but to know how to put yourself in a bubble when you want to be in a bubble. And for me, realizing that I had gone through that with my psychiatrist, today I laugh about it, and you have to laugh about it. Believe me, I have some really good memories of it now, looking back. You can also avoid going through that and just take care of yourself and work with the right people to get through it. I think what helped me hold on the most at the time was my dream of London. I was ready for school. I knew I was going to leave for school to the London College of Fashion. And I told myself, no, this is my escape from life. This is my new life starting. This is my dream to study. I have to hold on so I can go. So I was reading about CBT therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy. Great, we all have biases in our heads. And so it's about understanding when those biases are shaping our emotions rather than the emotion shaping our thoughts. I was reading everything in English, so I improved my English and started feeling much better. I asked to leave the clinic to spend 4 days in London. And actually, those were the best days of my life in a long time. And I told myself, okay, hang in there. We're going to London. We're going to crush it. We're going to kill it. So I got out of all that. I started working again. I started eating again for the better. And I went to London, to this incredible city that welcomed me with open arms, where I felt, really, that's the feeling. You finally arrive at your destination and you're well surrounded by it all. A brand new city, wonderful new friends, absolutely everything is new, creating a whole new me. And from that point on, unfortunately, there was a relapse because one of the main problems was starting to resurface. So I made the decision to cut ties a bit in order to protect myself. Well, I don't blame the person for that, I think. That's actually pretty funny. At the time, my mother had a friend who was a shaman. So get ready. We're getting into some more personal topics now. Who, I don't know why, but I really felt drawn to it. And I had a Skype call with her. And actually, she was someone who had a shamanic drum. And she played the shamanic drum in front of me over Skype. And I had this feeling as if my body started to tremble, but not just physically. It was really something energetic. Like you feel like you're shaking, but your body is completely normal. But inside, everything was trembling. And she looked at me out of the corner of her eye and said, I think you know some things about yourself, but you're going to discover other things. And then I looked at her like, what is this crazy woman talking about? Sorry. And she was right. Let's just say I spent the next 3, 4, maybe even 6 months having experiences that were a bit out of the ordinary, to put it that way, where I started to guess people's first names. I started to... So yes, let's calm down. I'm not a witch or a guru, but my intuitions were very strong, very developed actually. And I think they were awakened by the depression, where everything became unfiltered. So I felt everything 10 times more, to the point of actually being able to guess things about people. And that's when I thought, okay, life isn't what I thought it was. It's not just material, but there's also the invisible. And what is the invisible? It's spirituality, it's energy. And from that, something had to come out of it, actually. So at that moment, I decided to understand what human consciousness is, what it means to be incarnated in a body. And I did research. I took courses on the theory of humanity, on the different bodies, the emotional body, the physical body, the spiritual body, etc. At first glance, it might seem a bit far-fetched and unscientific, but I actually approached these things from a scientific perspective. The goal was to understand it from a completely down-to-earth point of view. Even though sometimes I had experiences where I was observing myself, and at one point there was a wolf of light next to me, I could see the chakras in my hands spinning. I think at this point 3/4 of you have tuned out, but that's okay. My spiritual friends understand me, hang in there. So there you have it. I had this experience where I told myself, okay, all of this is happening for a reason. And just before that, before I started my master's, I had applied for the program and I told the professor, look, I don't have the finances to enroll in the school. And he replied, there are scholarships, apply for one and you'll see. And I remember I was coming out of therapy at one point back then, and I asked the universe, I said, listen, things are tough in my head right now. It's complicated. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I need a sign, something to tell me I'm on the right path. And then I pick up my phone and open my emails. I get an email from the school saying, congratulations, Mr. Stephen Passereau, you have the scholarship. You'll be able to continue your master's, etc. I get chills. You can't see it, but it gives me goosebumps on my arms. And at that moment, I broke down in tears of joy because I told myself, okay, I've been through some really tough times for 3 years. And now I'm asking for help from something I didn't necessarily believe in, something invisible. And I get an answer. An immediate one saying, here, you have your scholarship to go to graduate school. Okay, I accept. Very, very strange experience. I have several like that. So I don't have the whole list, but it really opened my chakras, let's say. And from there, I tried to train myself in Reiki. So for those who don't know what Reiki is, it's a healing technique. I don't like the French word guérison because it's too tied to something broken or damaged, like physically. Healing is really an energetic matter, where through hand positions, it's a Japanese technique, and symbols, we manage to, as they say, channel energy from the universe through the hands to help the body, whether it's for physical or psychological aspects. Because for me today, the body is like a hard drive. And everything that happens or isn't processed stays stuck. So not in motion. And so once again, movement is clothing in motion and energy moving through the body in motion. From there, I wanted to train in this technique so I could get things circulating again. The energy that stagnates, that has a slow movement in the body. A little anecdote. It was one of the things that helped me get out of that. So there was yoga, therapy, psychologists, working with the shaman, and of course, creativity. You can imagine when you arrive in London and you haven't done a fashion BTS and you're faced with having to make clothes. I didn't know how to make a welt pocket. I didn't know how to do pattern making. Honestly, I didn't know how to do anything. Oh, well, actually, sorry. I had learned a few basics with the Paris City Hall, but I didn't have anything crazy either. So first year, I discovered things, etc. The first year in London was also more about partying every day than actually going to class. I did go to class. 2 days of classes per week, 3 days of open studio. I can assure you that on those 3 open studio days, we'd show up at 11 a.m. hungover and just keep partying. It was kind of like a post-psychiatric clinic revival. We partied. And actually, I remember that I got creatively blocked because all the problems took over. A creative mind is a bit like your inner child. It needs to be free and have space in order to create. And when you're caught up in problems, that space just isn't there. So I started meditating at the Buddhist Center in London. And just as a little anecdotal aside, when I got back to Paris, I read Thomas's book called Gods and Kings, The Rise and Fall of Alex McQueen and John Galliano, which is right behind me. And I found out that the meditation space at the London Buddhist Center was actually maintained thanks to a portion of Alex McQueen's inheritance that he left for that purpose. Just like what happens in fashion, McQueen hanged himself due to psychological problems. I kind of had this feeling of, he went all the way, unfortunately in the wrong direction, but he did some work. He left things behind to pass on to others and to help others heal. And I really broke down in tears. It's so silly, but it just did something to me inside, thinking, one of the greatest designers you respect had problems, unfortunately. But he also did things to leave behind spaces for others to find themselves. And I felt like the circle was complete. And so creativity, I started to look for a parallel in the process I was going through. So finding myself, rebuilding myself after all these mental, psychological, and psychic deconstructions, and how my work with clothing could come on top of that and give me this space to be able to find oneself, to exist as oneself. But really, it's no longer who I am with all the expectations I've learned, but who I am as a being before all the layers of society and everything I've put on top, or rather, that has been put on me as well. And so I entered into this narrative of clothing that evolves with you, that accompanies you in this transformation. And above all, it was a safe space that I needed, which I now recreate in my work. And for me, it was really a way to piece things back together. It's a bit like kintsugi. It's the broken plate that's been mended with gold. And as a result, it's even more beautiful. It's the beauty of imperfection. It's a bit like a scar from the past that's visible in the present, but is no longer suffered. It's truly healed. And for me, I really want to convey this idea in my work, whether it's through fashion, through this podcast, or through other things I'll create in the coming years, months, or even weeks. Who knows? You'll see later. There's this desire for creativity and expression. It's movement, so it's healing, so it's about healing. I once worked with a photographer who told me, all the pain you feel, all the hurt and the weight you carry, you put it into creativity, you pour it all in. Whether you show it or not, be creative and let it out. Because that way, it won't stay inside, it'll be outside, it'll be on the paper. Once it's on the paper, it doesn't belong to you in the same way anymore. And I think that it's the most beautiful thing we can do for ourselves. To exist as a creative person, just to be and to express yourself. Sometimes we look for a sense of life purpose or something like that. But already, if you are creative and you do what you are good at, that's already a mission in itself, because then you will inspire others to do the same. Sometimes when I wasn't at all in my creative work or storytelling, I always had a friend who would tell me, express what you have to say. Branding will come later. Set things in motion. That's the most life-saving thing. It's really something that, and now, for example, I see it when we do a fashion show or a fashion week event. We spend 6 months working like crazy on creating an atmosphere. And when we see it come to life, we're like, wow. And when I come to see you and say, I got goosebumps seeing your work, it means that all the emotion you put in was transmitted, shifted, carried over. That's really the alchemy of it all. And it's the most beautiful thing you can have when you elevate someone who comes to buy a garment, a piece. Those feelings too, it's about offering a positive transformation, and that's what matters most to me. And that brings me to the conclusion of today's podcast. It's the importance of shifting things. No matter what has happened in the past, I encourage you to express yourselves so you can transform and shift those things into something better and more positive.